got it. And I'm going to start recording too. And give me 1 second. We're getting more students. As a cohort knows, I was using Facebook Live for the summer, but we're going back to YouTube Live, which I think it's been helpful for us. And Tripty, I know you were doing like LinkedIn.
What on LinkedIn?
Okay, yeah.
Like LinkedIn? I never did that. Like the stories.
Yes.
No, I never did those. And they kind of died. They kind of died this sort of death that like Clubhouse is dying, right? Like I think it's like this isn't working.
Right, right. All right, I think we're in good shape. 11:58. I should have like a countdown clock, but I think what I'm gonna have you do. All right, we're all live. And I'm gonna. All right, we're on. I was just double checking. Okay, Brock, I'll hand it over to you.
Absolutely. Hello, welcome everyone to Focus's How to Be a CEO mentoring session. My name is Brock Kyle. I had the pleasure of becoming a mentee 5 years ago while I was a student at the University of Southern California. And I'm truly grateful to have been a part of Mr. Robinson's program. The mentorship and the one-on-one coaching helped me, especially as a minority, a person who felt that I was, seen but not necessarily supported during my time at the university. A little bit about myself now. I'm the CEO and founder of Taste Media. Our company leverages game mechanics to foster authentic social networking experiences between individuals. We've raised $1 million in our seed. We have some great investors ranging from Jason Calacanis to General Catalyst Partners. And yeah, we're looking to continue our round and launch our first product. We did a test launch back in December of last year that was covered in Gizmodo. And yeah, now we're sort of expanding our team and preparing for some new cool things. So thanks everyone for joining. And thank you to Curlin, who has definitely helped pave the way for me as an entrepreneur.
No, thanks, Brock. I always said you were like more of the student. A lot of the cohorts say certain people study like certain things, but Brock's always study startups, and he would always teach. He was a good peer for the cohort, so I always appreciate that, Brock. Professor Clark, maybe any updates from Innovation Hub, and we can start kind of our AMA after that.
Yeah, thanks, Curlin, for letting me share a couple things about the Innovation Hub at CSUSM. We just wanted to let everybody know, I know there's a number of students on and students that will watch this at a later time. The big thing that's coming up, just so you're aware of, is on November 16th at 6 p.m. We're doing our first pitch competition. This is kind of just some early stage kind of seed capital up to $500 to help you start getting your idea off the ground. So you can come and join and pitch your idea, your opportunity to a crowd. Something fun that we're going to do is that those in attendance will be voting on the winner. So it's a crowd-based fundraising campaign. So if you're just interested in coming and watching and participating, there's an opportunity for you to participate as a crowd member, but also if you're interested in pitching. So to pitch, go to csusm.edu/innovation hub, and you can register to pitch during the event. And we look forward to having you guys join us on November 16th at 6 p.m. Let's go back to you, Curly.
All right, that's great. There's Jason. How you doing, Jason?
Good. How are you?
Good. You know what? This all came about. This talk was last week. Just so everyone knows, all month is called San Diego Startup Month. We have hundreds of speakers that come speak to startups. We used to do that in person at the convention center, but we kind of did a hybrid. We mostly done most of them online. We had a really great topic for our initial incubator group. We have 10 startups that are part of this whole incubator of Startup San Diego. And I've been speaking to them each week. And we had this topic about how to be a CEO. I spoke about an hour on it. This is going to be like some excerpts from it, some questions that the group had. But I wanted to make it kind of like AMA for the fact that we have startups here, actually, and see if we can get some different perspectives. That's why we brought Professor Clark in. We have Jason McBride. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself? I mean, you can talk about your initial startup, and then we'll.
How's it going, guys? I actually graduated from Cal State San Marcos back in 2018. Just after graduating, with the support of Sam, actually, we started a business called Through Catalog. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but originally it started as a wholesale platform for local breweries, but then because of COVID, I had to switch to direct to consumer. And so I was running, we were talking about CEOs, I was running all the positions. I was even doing the deliveries, picking it up, doing the customer service, building the website, doing all of that all by myself. So it was kind of a cool experience to be able to kind of talk about.
And we'll touch on that, Jason, because some of the questions from our incubator was the fact that how do you actually even be more high performance? There's people who talk about deep work, like how do you do that, right? So we'll go deeper in that. There's some questions in there. Professor Clark, I know people already know you, but could you just do like a little intro yourself? Back up.
Yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm a faculty member here at Cal State San Marcos. I teach entrepreneurship. I'm also the director of the Innovation Hub and a serial entrepreneur. So I've been involved with several different startups in the tech space, financial technologies, healthcare technologies, et cetera. So glad to be on here.
Professor, I think what I want to kind of start off with some of the questions I got asked, and maybe I'll pose that to you, Jason, and Professor Clark. One of the questions I was asked as being a CEO is that this is more dilemmas, right? So there's a book that I give all the CEOs, even at USC. There's a book called Founder's Dilemma by Noam Wasserman. He's a Harvard professor, pretty solid. We got him at USC for a little bit, but he interviewed, I think, around 15,000 to 20,000 founders to make this book. So it's kind of been like a little Bible for us. Noam has been kind of a mentor at Fokcus for us. He's been a good advisory board. And he has 3 things, he says, as dilemmas. There's this personal dilemma. Kind of like, think that if you just had a baby or you just got married or, like, should you start a startup at that time, right? These personal dilemmas that a lot of founders have. Second, there's these career dilemmas that people have, meaning that I have a lot of friends who are at Google, right? I have some other friends at Apple. They're getting paid really well, but they do want to start something. Do they want to go out and risk that capital or it's always this kind of opportunity cost, right? And the third thing is this product market, kind of this market dilemma. Everyone who is a startup always looks at product market fit. Pretty much what product market fit means is that you make something that people love. That's product market fit, right? So those are the 3 main dilemmas, but there's other dilemmas in there too. And one of the questions I got, Professor Clark, I'll give it to you, is the fact that he said, well, if you have money dilemmas, which is, that's like a real world. And a lot of our incubator companies right now are raising. They have capital coming in. They're doing pretty good on the MRR, but they had some money dilemmas and knowing if they should actually get investment or should they bootstrap longer. But that was some of the questions I got, Professor Clark. What would you say if someone told you that? They have money dilemmas. And I can give you more details on that person too, but I'll start off with that.
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, that's resource constraints are a primary issue with entrepreneurs, right? Unless we're coming off a big sale and starting a new business, most of us are constrained by our resources. And so that's why I think our shift in how we start businesses is we've shifted over the last couple of years and moved away from traditionally we went out and raised a bunch of capital. So my first startup, we went out and we raised a bunch of capital and that's how we got started. And now we move much more to that lean startup mentality, right? So We're trying to spend little money as possible. And I think it goes back down to you have a minimum viable product, and that minimum viable product is not going to be the product you want to sell. It's going to be the most basic product that you can offer that will help begin to solve their needs, in which they will exchange money for. In a lot of cases for entrepreneurs, what they need to start with is that they need to start with something that they can do with, as little money as possible. And then when they generate revenue, they can invest that into making it more efficient. The other part is, moving along in the business, depending on where you're at, you always have to remember that there's really 2 points in time where you're raising money from other people. When you're raising money from angel investors, it's to fix parts of a business model is primarily what you do. And so you have to have a business model, and you have to be executing that business model. And by doing so, you identify the points in the business model which are inefficient and could use need for an investment. If you've identified those, it makes it much easier to go to somebody who has financing and to say, hey, this is the problem within my business model. It will cost this much to fix, and it will result in a certain amount of return on within the system. So when you're talking with those early stage investors, you have to be running people through a business model and identifying the key points in which you're trying to fix. And then obviously venture capital funding is, hey, your business model works. It's pretty efficient. Now we just want to duplicate it hundreds or thousands or millions of times. That's where you're looking for venture capital funding. So at different stages, you're kind of asking, you're solving different problems with financing. And really what probably we're talking about with a lot of entrepreneurs in this group is that early seed stage, right? You're looking for a few $1,000s just to do prototypes and things like that. Do something that's even more basic, right? So some people might do a manual process when in the future they want to do an automated or an app, right? But if you're providing value, you can do it in different ways.
I like how you said stages. I prefaced before telling the cohort a little bit what I was thinking about with the money dilemma, but I did say CEOs, founders need to have 3 things they need in their toolkit. They need to be able to plan, right? These stages that you're in, right? You need to actually at least and somewhat be a little ahead of the game on what stage you need to be at. You need capital, runway, things of that nature. 2, you need to be able to execute it. A lot of that's a little bit more on having a good team that actually can help with that. And the 3rd thing you need to have is this storytelling. So we talked about what that looks like, even storytelling, your numbers, what they look like, what problem you're solving, what the market's going to look like. So those are the 3 things I kind of said like the CEO needs to have, but those stages are recognizing those stages is really good. Jason, I'm going to give that to you, the money dilemma, right? You were pretty much CEO, CFO, CTO. I know you were doing coding with that one, but how did you handle that, and what was your take on that? I know you learned a lot from Professor Clark.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I was coming out of college with no money, but a lot of open mind for learning. So I kind of, with some help with some courses and videos that Sam gave me for building a website, I kind of took that and was like, okay, well, I don't have the money to pay someone to make a website. I don't have the money to do pretty much hire anyone for the team. I don't have any money at all. Really, I'm just trying to solve this problem, like Sam mentioned, in a manual way, creating that minimal viable product. And I ran that for a year with a minimum viable product. So it was actually profitable having, I had 10 breweries at one point. And what that really gave me the opportunity to do, as far as not getting any money in and really doing it bootstrap, was that I ended up stopping it after a year because I saw that the demand for what I was doing wasn't really what gonna excel because of there's numerous reasons as far as the breweries weren't ready to commit to something like this, nor did they have the time to commit or the money. And so all these things that I figured out after working with them for over a year, I saved myself before. If I would have taken a bunch of money in, or I would have got to a point where I've been like, okay, let me try to get a $10,000 investment. Well, then I didn't even know what to do with that $10,000. And so it really saved me, and it saved me time, and that idea of fail fast, where I was able to really test the viability of my product and my service, and as well as the demand, without risking any money. It was only my time. So, I mean, that kind of sums it up.
Yeah, I think I relate with you, Jason. When I was coming out, when I was still at USC, it was like a freshman when I started my first company. We had zero money, right? And so my study group, we just somewhat figured out that at least we could code something, right? We're all computer science, and that's how we saved so much cash initially, right? And oh, we have a question from David. David,
Jason, could you go over what that company was, the one associated with the craft breweries?
Yeah, so originally we starting out before COVID, the entire brewery industry was really taking off. There was this huge bubble. I mean, obviously, once COVID happened, distribution completely stopped for 2 months. And so the wholesale side kind of shifted, and as well as the demand for craft beer. And so I shifted to direct to consumer. So it was really like a DoorDash for local breweries. And so what I saw was demand in COVID was high for deliveries for the 3 to 4 months that it was really heavy. But once things started opening up, I saw that the real demand for the local breweries, not as much as the big breweries, the real local breweries was the actual going into the tap rooms. And so that's where I saw the demand for deliveries kind of fell off, because really people, they go to these breweries as a social environment, less more than the drinking. And so the demand for the beer, although people like craft beer, they like drinking craft beer in social environments. And so that's where I was able to test that the service I was providing actually didn't have the demand that I was thinking it would after COVID. And so that's kind of where I allowed myself to kind of slowly get out of the business while still being profitable in the end.
yeah.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong.
That's
So
good.
you started off as a business to business company.
Correct.
So you would deliver, let's say, so the two breweries are just off the top of my head that I can think of are, let's see, like Boochcraft or let's say, so if you would deliver craft beer from one tap room to a different business. Is that
So really
or a different?
the wholesale side was more of a way for beer buyers of restaurants and grocery stores and whatever else where they needed to purchase beer. Was giving them a platform access to local breweries that they don't really see as much, because these local breweries have maybe one guy going out and getting in contact and actually running as a rep to go get their name out there. But these small breweries, because they had such low amount of money and time to be given out to have these representatives, then the distribution companies kind of just took over all of the taps and all of the access, because it was a lot easier for the beer buyer just to go through a distributor or go through a couple of distributors. And so the goal was to have an access point to give the self-distributed breweries and the smaller guys an opportunity to be seen.
Oh, okay. So did your so I'm assuming that you had a lot of marketing type of activities that you'd have to like pitch these smaller breweries to restaurants and the like.
Right. So that was kind of the purpose of. So really, I didn't even change the platform. The platform kind of stayed the same. It was really just an online access point. Just think of an e-commerce site, but for the wholesale. And I shifted that when I went direct to consumer out of wholesale. But before, it was really just an online source, so that the representatives didn't have to actually go in physically, and really they can start really focusing on doing emails and sending them to the actual website where they can actually order, rather than, because what they do and what they did is that they really are just like on a phone call. They're like, hey, I need this beer based on your list. It's like a PDF Excel sheet that's super confusing. And so that's why a lot of them ended up going to distributors, because it's like, okay, it's easy. I can just go boom, boom, boom. But then these other guys that were smaller, I mean, it was kind of more difficult. And so it was really trying to build a gap between the difficulty of getting a local brewery inside of your tap room and the ability for the local brewery to get inside of the restaurant.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very you had good awareness to take advantage of this regional specialty that we have in San Diego. That's very intuitive. So yeah, I just wanted to comment on that.
Appreciate that.
That was great questions, David. And all those went to all those type of toolkits, Jason. You actually are really good at doing this customer discovery, right? Or actually even interviewing and seeing trends. Did Professor Clark help you with that pivot, or you did that on your own?
The pivot.
Yeah,
Uh,
I call it a pivot, but maybe it was
yeah,
just
the pivot. I really was just kind of back against the wall. I was at the time I was living in my girlfriend's parents' trailer because we couldn't go back and forth between our parents at the time, and so I was like, okay, well, I don't know how long this is gonna last. There is no wholesale right now. I don't know when that is ever gonna come back.
sure.
These breweries had really no access point to get beer to customers, and they were starting to do the delivery thing, but none of them really could commit to it because they didn't even have the didn't have the manpower to actually run the deliveries. They didn't have the program to be able to have people order. And so really I just saw it as an opportunity where, okay, we already have this platform built. Let's make some small tweaks. So actually within a week made the tweaks and launched it. And then we ended up having like 35 orders the first week, just because the demand for those breweries and demand to support those breweries was high. And so really I got a lot of the customer base from the breweries that I had on already. And so it was kind of a kind of a seamless pivot to do that at the time.
No, that's great. Professor Clark, on this, like our data says like 66% of startups do some sort of pivot in that first kind of year. Professor Clark, what have you seen with pivots and how leaders can handle some of those, or because there's been a lot of pivots during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's true. The idea you're going to start with is not the idea you're going to finish with, at any point in time. And I think that's a characteristic of a good entrepreneur, is the willingness to change your idea, and oftentimes change it quickly, right? And respond to customers. Now, there is a dilemma, right? You don't want to respond to every different customer,
Okay.
and you don't want to chase. So there's a little bit this fine line of like sticking to your gun and what you believe and the value that you're trying to create, and then pivoting, but when it's appropriate, but not also pivoting for every customer, because then your resources get spread across too many different products and services. And so I think that's a real challenge, but I think open-mindedness about changing and willingness to change is an important characteristic of somebody who's trying to start and build a company.
Great. I know, Brock, you were talking about earlier about pivoting with taste and things of that nature. I think one thing I've been learning more and more is that talking to some of my other friends when they're evaluating companies, this is either on the VC side or accelerator side. I think I might mention this to our cohort. People look for founders, CEOs that are committed. That's one, right? And there's a lot of ways you can figure out they're committed. I remember talking to a founder before, and he actually had pretty much like a platform that helped with active shooters, because he had a young daughter who was part of this kind of active shooting type of scenario. And so he was committed to solving what that could look like, right? Second thing after being committed is someone competent. Can I put Jason in one room by himself in a trailer and he could figure it out, right? Like, what does that look like, right? You just that's it. And the third piece is actually being coachable, because actually in a lot of ways you're going to be dealing with things that you probably have never dealt with before, and sometimes you might have an advisory board or a member of your executive board or something like that can maybe help coach you, or you have like a Professor Clark. For all you guys at Cal State San Marcos, you guys have a great mentor to help you with that. So those are the three things I do think people need to think about: being committed, competent, and this kind of coachability piece. I have another question I got from the incubator part. I'll see how Jason handles it. This question, because I know, Jason, I know you more like a solopreneur, but they were asking, how do you resolve issues with people you work with? And that could be like a co-founder, that could be a first employee, things of that nature. Have you had any of those type of conversations, Jason, or you've just been solopreneur, or you've just been resolving problems externally to your company?
Yeah, I think a lot more so right now. I have like a side business. Me and my close friend, we build websites, and I'm kind of, when we're working through things, obviously we're constantly building processes. This is since it's beginning. So every new client, every new thing we do, it's a process building, what works, what doesn't work. And so sometimes we'll kind of be like, hey, this is how it should be done. No, this is how it needs to be done. And it really kind of becomes this trust between the both of us, and say, hey, we kind of have different skill sets that we need to highlight. And so, hey, we trust each other on this. I trust you on this decision. You trust me on this decision. And it kind of becomes more of a congruent. We have one common goal, and we're reaching that common goal. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about, and really like that collaboration piece. It's really about what can be discussed and communicated to reach that goal quicker, faster, or however, whatever the goal it may be. Like that collaboration piece is key.
That's great. That was a theme, actually, Jason, all month. It's been the word trust, right? Even externally, when you're actually creating a pitch deck or you're creating your forecast, like, can you gain trust? Can you gain like the fact that you're authentic with your company, right? Internally, but actually externally. So that's been like the theme all month. So I like how you said trust. Professor Clark, I know with co-founders, they're always going to have some issues. There are employees, things of that nature. What's one way, some couple of advices on how to resolve issues in a company, right?
Well, I think there's two things that I mean, communication is number one, right? You always have to be willing to communicate, and sometimes overly communicate, and share your thoughts, and then the openness, right? One thing that I always have a problem with, and it's the stubbornness in me, right, is that I think my way is the best way. But in reality, there are thousands of ways to accomplish something, right? And your way may not be the best way. You'll have opinions, but even if the other way is, in the end, not as good as yours, like, right, does it still accomplish, kind of like what Jason was saying, does it still accomplish the goal? And in a lot of cases, communicating, sharing ideas, and then letting people make decisions and pursue, because there's lots of different ways to accomplish it. I think having that attitude will be helpful. When you're resolving issues, when you can't come to an impasse, best solution, flip a coin. Not just kidding.
We had like a part 2 on that. Professor Clark and Jason was on the fact of equity. We had someone had co-founders, and then they had 50-50 equity, and now the other person is not doing the work. I mean, Brock maybe had that issue too. But the main thing is that there was some equity pieces there, so some legal things. You have any advice on resolving that, Professor Clark? Or?
Well, the best thing to do in that is how you originally set it up, right? That equity is something that you earn over time with accomplishing certain metrics, right? So those are things that you set up with your co-founder early on. What are the metrics that allow us to vest our equity into this business, right? You should never approach a business saying we're going to give 50-50, because it's a long process. It's decades in the making, possibly. And people are going to commit different amounts of time, because life is going to be different for different people. And so put in place a plan on how you're going to invest things over time, so that nobody feels like they're stuck, right? Because on the same side, you don't want to feel like I have to do this because I don't want to disappoint my co-founder because I've taken 50% of the business. And on the other side, you don't want to be angry with your co-founder because they've now bailed on it and they own half the company. So I think it's some early stage planning that helps avoid some of the conflicts that occur when it comes to equity.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Founder Dilemma book again, but there's a chapter in there you guys can read too. Noma always has it in the contract, the covenant, right? It's like these if then else statements. Like if you're working 40%, you get this much equity. When that reduces, right? You get this much equity. So more like planning that out before you have these kind of major issues works out pretty good. I always feel like when you have this kind of co-founder or first employee, it's kind of like a marriage, right? So it's kind of really good to have it kind of thought out a little bit, right? Jason, I'm gonna give you this question, and also everyone, if you guys, Tripty has some really great things. Tripty actually sent this thing out, cofounders.gus.com. Thanks, Tripty. Has some questions on that. Tripty,
It's good. It's a calculator. That's the thing. It's like, who's contributing technically, who's contributing operationally, who do you expect to really take the reins on business development, just as an initial starter for that conversation. And it's free, so just check it out and go through that together. And it's a good starting point for that conversation. And I totally agree with Professor Clark. Like, the biggest disaster, and I've had this in the past, so I'm learning from my own, is to split equally. Never do it. A decision has to come from somebody. It's not a democracy. Like, I'm all for let's be as equal as we can, but there has to be a point where someone makes the call.
I love it, Trippy.
I'll give one quick thought, because I was helping Jason out for a while, right? And we talked a little bit about equity at times and so forth. And always remember, when you're discussing equity, it's great to be a small part of something than a large part of nothing. So I think that's just the people who are working and doing the work, like, reward them appropriately so that it can be successful, right? And if you're not going to be able to at the time, then take a smaller part and reward yourself differently, because it's better to be a part of something that people are working hard towards than taking a big chunk and demotivating co-founders, and then nothing ever happens.
That's really solid. That's solid. Jason, I'm gonna give you this question. I had some answers to this basically on how I go about things, but this question was like, how can you be more productive? Right? They're talking more about high performance, being CEO, high performance. But what are some things that you do to be productive on your startup?
I think what I've always kind of been, I just do, and I never take that step back. And this is what I kind of started realizing, especially really in the last few months, as I'm doing this on a side. This business on the side is more, I have to really set goals. Complete those goals, especially with my co-founder, where he also is doing this on the side. It's really, we have to really designate time to be able to complete tasks that we set forward, instead of just doing something and then not really creating that process. And then I have to then redo what I did because I didn't set myself up for the next time around. And so it's kind of what I've seen is taking that step back to set those goals, really narrow down what we're doing, what our values are, why we're doing this, and then kind of going in and doing each step, and then figuring out what we need to fix, what we need to do, and then that saves time for the next time we do the same thing, because we've already done it, we've already created a process for it. And so really it's just saving our time every time we kind of take that step back and analyze what we did.
Yeah, I like that review part. One of my follow-up one of my responses at Jason when I was talking to the other cohort was back to how I do my week. I've always done my week very much the same, and it's always been the fact that it's been by days. Like, Monday is my planning day. I plan all day, right? Tuesday is my people day, meaning I have to have a good night's sleep. I have to eat really well in the morning because I'm more of an introvert, right? Because I'm going to have people day. And that people day could be me talking to investors, or me just talking to developers, or just me just actually just being out there and talking to customers. Wednesday is usually my project day. We're doing project planning. We're doing all types of things that helps the company move forward. And Thursday is just I have to produce something. That's why tech school is always on Thursday, because we're producing a show, but we're also producing code and content. I like the review because Friday I've always left my phone at home, and Friday I've always been reviewing, did all that work? What do I need to do? Things like that nature. So it's kind of deep work type of thinking, but I did it since I was a kid. My dad helped me kind of figure out, me being an introvert, that I didn't always have to have people day Monday through Friday. It could be just Tuesday, Wednesday. Professor Clark, I know you talk with a lot of groups. Any tips you have on performance and tools or anything that they help with CEOs or help with founders?
Yeah, so I mean, there's always, you're going to work hard, right?
Yeah.
But you also have to work smart, because oftentimes we really eat up all of our time just working hard, and there's a point where we need to focus on, like, how can we do this? Jason was mentioning this, right? How can we do this faster, more efficient, better than we've done before? Because as an entrepreneur, time is also one of those things that you're constrained by. You just don't have enough time to get everything done. And so it's really about, and I think you had you just need to come up with a P for Friday, and you have the 5 Ps of the week, planning, people, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, a lot of time entrepreneurs will be busy, but they're not productive.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah, and that's why I've seen that a lot too. Even at Brock at USC, I've seen a lot of people just being busy and they were like worn out, right? And so that's the part we try to not have the founders or CEOs have. I think I did end it when I was talking to some of the incubator groups that I think Paul Graham from Y Combinator said it best. He said, "I want you to work on the product, right? Just work on the product, get it solid, MVP, right? Talk to customers. And then the third thing I want you to do is actually just take care of yourself. Sleep well, drink a lot of water, exercise, because a lot of CEOs think this is more like a sprint. Like Professor Clark said, this is like a marathon, right? Our data, even at USC, UCLA, it was like took about 3 to 4 years of like major time, and you've seen the results from that 3 to 4 years, some major traction. And then our other data point is like about 8 to 9 years it takes for like some sort of exit, right? Just so everyone knows my background, I had 3 exits. My first exit was an IPO. That took exactly, I believe it took about 4 to 6 years to get all that going. And my second other company, it took about 7 years to get acquired, my energy company. And the other one, it took about another like 6 years. So it's actually, I always see it's like I don't want to say like a grind, but it's not going to be overnight success. So you need to just take care of yourself. That's all.
One other thing, currently, I was kind of, you work hard and you want to avoid getting burned out, And one thing I always advise entrepreneurs to do too is try to find ways to generate some revenue, because one of the most disappointing thing is when you work hard for month after month after month after month and you've never converted a single customer. And it might not be because your idea is bad. It's just that you've been focusing too much on building the product or doing something else. And so sometimes it's nice just to go out and get customers just so you can have the satisfaction of that your hard work is doing something.
Yeah, I think to touch on that, I think really before with the wholesale, I wasn't really making much money. But once I started doing direct consumer, I actually started seeing numbers, and it wasn't just the satisfaction, it was also the confidence that, okay, now I'm doing something that I'm actually seeing a result in. Like this plus this equals money, and it doesn't even matter how much money it is, it just gives me that confidence that I'm able to do something that in the end and put the effort in to make money come out. And so value gets exchanged for value. So it's really like and that's kind of another thing. It just as you're building, it's like building your confidence that you're actually creating something that someone wants to purchase or that someone wants to give money for. And it's important to me.
I definitely love that. I like that. We always say at Focus, we always want to get 1% better each day. We don't want perfection at all at Focus. Let's just progress. That's it. I have a question for you guys. Both of you guys can try and answer this. We had a few the startups. We have it's a mix. We have like half female founders, half male founders in the Startup San Diego 21 incubator, right? And a lot of them were talking about cultures, like in your company, how you like they've been part of bad cultures, like bro cultures, right? Or they like, how do you set the tone, and what's the best way to think about culture when you're creating a startup? I'll start with you, Professor Clark. Have you seen anything of that nature? Maybe a book or something of that nature, or what? I had some feedback initially, but I want to get you guys' take first.
I think culture, it really is going to start with the founder, and it's very difficult to change once it's started, right? Culture is defined by all the language, the processes, the people that we surround ourselves with. And so it's complicated and complex. So how do you create a unique culture? How do you create a creative or innovative culture? I think it's really, you have to instill it in yourself. It's one of those challenges, because culture really develops with the people that you bring in, right? So it's selecting the right types of people. That's one of the things, and whether it's good or bad. But really, a lot of times in those interviews, when you're hiring new employees, your question is, how do they fit with everybody else? Is that good or bad or appropriate? I don't know. Like, it's also good. I think nowadays we value different cultural, different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I think instilling that into our workplace helps us to develop new and unique cultures. And going to that a little bit, it's just in today's world, you really have to set yourself apart. And if you're a kind of mono in your way of thinking, I think that you're going to be beat by your competitors. I think you need to have ideas coming from different places, from different people. And so I think ideally in today's world, the culture that is needed is a diverse culture, one that accepts people and language and ideas and things from all different places.
That's great. Jason, I'm gonna give you this other question from Andrew offhand. Andrew, you can unmute yourself if you want, or I can say it. Andrew still on? His question said, I heard the saying, work smarter, not harder, a lot. But what do you think is the best way to know if you're working hard enough or smart enough?
Yeah, so it's hard to have a metric of what you're doing. And this is honestly, it's kind of like what Sam was talking about like having some kind of direction. And really it's hard to say when you're working hard because you're in like kind of going back on doing too much at one time and not putting any time into yourself. I think it's hard to say when you're not working hard. It's kind of a personal thing, right? Like if I'm putting in 70 hours a week, am I working hard enough? If I'm putting in 20 hours a week, am I working hard enough? It's hard to say. It kind of depends on what goals you've set and what you kind of come to complete. And so really it's like, okay, I can sit here and brainstorm, and that's kind of time that I'm taking brainstorming and figuring out things to do. But really that goes back to the goal setting. So if I'm setting goals and completing those goals, that kind of work smarter kind of follows through with that, because you figure out how to complete that goal. Once you figure it out, you kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. And so there's that smarter piece where, okay, well, next time I have a similar goal, I'm going to work smarter because I learned from that past one. And so that they kind of go hand in hand. And it's really not about you working 70 hours a week means you're working hard. It means that you're working 70 quality hours a week. So it's like if you can get done 30 hours of quality time and productivity versus spending 70 hours of poor quality time, then it doesn't really matter how much time you're putting in. It matters what you're completing.
No, that's great. I know here at Fokcus we use a lot of tools, Jason, with like a Kanban board or things of that nature. That's helped us out a lot because it's visual. Like, we got this done, right? I'll pull it up later on. I'll show you like one of our old Kanban boards to show. Professor Clark, any tips on that? Measuring, gauging velocity. I'm a developer. We talk the word velocity a lot, but
yeah, I mean, the first thing I think about this that tools idea, but really one of the first gauges I always have is if you are doing a repeated task over and over and over again, you shouldn't do it more than 2 times before you realize this can be automated away. And I think that's part of how I look at a lot of these processes. A lot of these people, a lot of times we spend the time doing the same things over and over and over again, and they're repeatable tasks that can be automated away with either tools you pull off the shelf or tools you develop or a process you develop. But I think those are the things when I say work smart is oftentimes entrepreneurs get caught just doing things versus stepping back, spending an hour, building a tool, writing some code or something, and then never having to do it again. And then they free their time to go to progress, really, because that's the only way you're going to grow is you're removing the need for the resources. And your time is a very important resource. And if you can eliminate the need for certain things to take up your time, now your time is free to grow the business, right? So we only grow the business as we limit the resources that we need, and we can then expand on it. So.
I like that. We got a comment from Alicia. Alicia, do you want to unmute yourself? I like your comment, or I can read it off too.
Okay. I kind of think this is a kind of like a personal way of kind of assessing yourself as far as like the work ethic you have towards your own, how you value your own business. But as far as like my comment, I think using a schedule to complete goals is part of working smart aspect, and then how committed you are to the schedule is how hard you're working. I think it can like go either way, but I think it has to do a lot with your personal value in your business and what you think that is best for your business.
Yeah, I like that, Alicia. That goes back to those three things CEOs need to have: planning, right? A schedule is a good way to kind of plan that out, and then executing on that on those schedule items. I actually have to schedule a lot of different things, even though it might be minute stuff. Like I gotta go, even doctor appointments, stuff like that. I have these blocks, and I learned a little bit from. We had a speaker at tech school last season, Jake DeGrassi. He's from USC, Brock, and he's really into deep work, and he has an app on that. But he said like schedule blocks of time to actually work on certain things, and just have them very like I'm gonna have this one block of time to schedule all my investor meetings, right? Or so like just schedule those, even if you feel like you don't need to schedule everything. So I definitely, Alicia, Jake in the deep work group really value schedule. So you're dead on that. You know what? I have this question offhand. It actually deals more with leading a startup. Well, I guess sometimes CEOs is kind of like this analog as being like a leader, and want to get you guys' perspective on what is leading to you guys. What when you use that word lead, I know Jason, you were using the word trust. That was kind of part of that little formula of leading, right? People trust you. But I'll start with you, Jason. Like, what's maybe even your style of leading or things of that nature, or one of the things you've noticed from other people you maybe admire that are pretty good at leading us?
I think like what I do. I mean, obviously, like if you're the CEO, if you're the leader, you're kind of setting a direction. You're setting the goals of what the business is to do, and then you're relaying those goals over to your employees or your co-founders, and then that kind of goes back to that trust piece where if after the goals are laid, then you trust that you have relayed the goal for them to help you complete it. You know, it could be somewhat of an ambiguous goal, but as long as you can trust them. But the other piece is working harder than everyone else. That's kind of where I fall, where I have my co-founder, but really I see this as my business, and I got him on here. And so really, I don't think it's his responsibility to be as, I don't know, I guess as drilled into the business, because those are the things I'm supposed to be doing to be able to relay over. And so there's tasks and there's things and there's costs that I take in before, and that he doesn't even see, that I take it upon myself for the business, and then it's just communicating that across. And so that kind of helps where he's trusting me that what I'm relaying has been thought through already.
That's great. I was thinking about what you were saying, Jason, because my early startups, I would just we would divvy it out. I think I heard from other groups too. Like I don't know, a lot of people probably know about Twitch, right? Twitch started off by it was another company, but it turned into Twitch. But Michael Sebo, Justin Kahn, they actually explained that when they were leading, it was more like they were leading their department. Like Justin would just be working on product. Michael would be working on like the financials part. I forgot the other guy would just be working on, and it worked well that way because they were all working on their own quote unquote department. Even though it was only 3 of them, right? And that actually helped a lot because they weren't trying to lead each other, but they actually were leading their department. And as their company grew, they at least knew a lot about what type of people they needed to get help from. So it was just a good way. I like how you kind of explain it, but there's a little intro story from Twitch. Professor Clark, leading, right? CEO, like what's some tips? Tips.
I think that the characteristic, or the thing that's kind of really defines CEOs, entrepreneurs, they fit in the same categories in one particular instance, and that's that they're the the people who work in uncertain conditions, right? Most people are told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, right? They follow processes. And an entrepreneur is organizing those processes and those systems and putting them in place, and they're hiring employees to fit within the business model to complete certain tasks and to do certain things. An entrepreneur and a CEO, they have no instruction manual. They're the ones who have to create the instruction manual. And so they're operating in conditions of uncertainty, and they're the ones who have to have the vision and to see how we can bring things from uncertainty into kind of a more certain environment, or more predictable environment. And I think vision is important, right? So they have to be out looking forward, seeing how the world changed, because everything's rapidly changing, and between politics and markets and finances, everything changes so quickly and rapidly that uncertainty remains really high, and you have to be willing to work in those areas and have a vision and see what's going on, and then translate that, communicate that back into your organization on how you can adjust or pivot or build new processes to meet the changes in the environment.
I like that. My style is a lot of like more servant leadership to Professor Clark. Jason, like I'll give you a few examples. A lot of my engineers work. This is initially their first project at Virtual, so I've always made sure that they got books to read, make sure they go to conferences. I always try to educate people. So that was one way of how I've kind of led. And then in some ways, that became this kind of cultural learning for Fokcus, that now everyone who learns something will teach the rest of the engineering. Actually, it's kind of been more a really great way of kind of creating a great culture of learning. I've always done things too that would help someone, like a little curling, right? So right now we have an engineer that just learning how to drive. So I've been every Saturday we go to Cal State San Marcos and we go to the parking lot. We learn how to drive. We do parking lot. So any way you could kind of make someone's experience better, right? As a CEO, it doesn't matter if you're helping someone learn how to drive or help someone learn how to code. I think that's a good way of a CEO at least to connect and say that, build that trust and just build like that. It's beyond Fokcus or beyond your company. Like I want you to do well. You'd be a good driver too, right? But that's some ways I've learned, and I've learned that a lot from other groups too. On the other side, I learned a lot from Google and Microsoft, where you have, just like Jason, you have these great plans. So we do weekly sprints, so everyone knows at the end of this week we kind of produce something. We also have these 6-month seasons, so at least people know in 6 months this is what Fokcus kind of looks like. It's a little fuzzy, but this is what we're kind of thinking about. And then Google and Microsoft has these visions, 18 months. Right, we kind of plan out. So we do that a lot at Fokcus. I've done that in a lot of my other companies. Have these kind of small little goals, like Jason says, that everyone kind of knows about. That helps out as a CEO. They have these, like Professor Clark, these communication plans. I want to have some final thoughts. I'll start with you, Jason. Being a leader, being a CEO, startup. Any final thoughts you have for like a new CEO, a new startup founder?
I think the biggest thing is just the doing aspect of just doing it. If you're scared to commit, or you're scared to do something, that's kind of where that minimum viable product comes in. It's just like, get something going and get started on something, because at the end, if it doesn't work out, you learn something that you can then apply to something else. And that's where I've kind of have opportunities from just trying to start that business, and I was able to start the business, but the takeaways were almost even better than the success I had while running the business.
That's great, Jason, and thanks for being all transparent, even with the trailer, all that. That's solid. That's like real talk from a founder. Professor Clark, some final thoughts for new founder, CEO. Unmute. I do that all the time.
There you go. Yeah,
I do it all the time.
I was chatting with you, Curling, so I was on the wrong button. But I think early on it's something that you really have to have a love for what you're trying to accomplish, because those first little while it's tough and it's hard work, and you spend 100 hours a week on it, and you have to enjoy it. There's a lot of discovery and learning, and one of the things that's important is that nobody, not a single CEO, not even the best CEOs in the world, know everything. And they may appear to know everything. What they're really good at is they find out the answers and they surround themselves with people who are good. And I think that's how they become successful, is always learning, always trying to grow, always trying to find ways to do things better.
That's great. I know you have to jump off, Professor Clark. We'll end it here. The only thing I would just add to is just stay curious, right, about certain things, like learn. I always found out I've done better when I was curious about a subject or about something, right? I'm really into cryptocurrency now, so I'm learning on it, and that's helping me with coding, right? So just be curious as a founder. I think that's the best way, and just experiment a lot. You're either gonna, when you do these little small experiments as CEO, you're either gonna like succeed on that experiment or you're gonna learn, right? That's it. So those are my kind of two feedback. Brock, thanks for welcoming everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for the I'll give you the USC shout out. Thanks for our current Fokcus cohort for coming on, and all the Cal State San Marcos students. Great questions. That was really solid. We'll be back on next week. We're gonna have a lot. Next couple of weeks we're gonna have designers coming on, talking about design and product and stuff like that, and then we'll still be talking about building, but we're gonna mix it up and probably bring in some other people from Startup San Diego Month to come and speak to. So yeah, look out for all the new I guess the new type of content we're gonna be doing this season. So take care, everybody.
Take care.
Okay.